Good morning to you on this 21st day of October. It is a mutual Monday. I'm facing Monday, and so are you, Theo. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Is it Old Mutual or what mutual is this?
Definitely not Old Mutual. The mutuality of facing Monday. We can't get
Oh,
away from it.
I feel old on this mutual side of things.
Yep. I trust you are well,
I'm
Theo.
well,
Good
thank you.
morning,
Thank you.
listeners. For those of you who have tuned in to the Fifth Connection, we are spending our time in an unfolding story about what it means and what it looks like when we wise up. We need to wise up to skillful living. Chapter 1 of Colossians. These believers at Colossae were facing some awkward challenges that were captivating their minds and skewing their lives in a particular direction. And so in chapter 1 of this unfolding story, the emphasis is on showcasing skillful living. And now in chapter 2, looking at verse number 8, we need to shun senseless living. And part of shunning senseless living has to do with getting inoculated. But getting inoculated with something that will immunize us against ideology. Because ideologies are idolatries of ideas, systems that are set up, particularly in the believing Christian worldview. And I'm using two descriptors there, believing and Christian, because I want to use a third word that kind of overshadows these two. Followers of the way need immunity against ideology, because ideology is something that can immobilize us in our thinking so that we become dead in the head and everywhere else. And it reminds me of what happened during COVID. What was the question according to our satirizing cartoonist, the prophet Shapiro? Shapiro said, to be vaccinated or not to be. And someone pipes up on the other end. Stupid question. Well, it was a tough time for all of us because some of our loved ones died as a result of being infected by that virus. So this morning, I want to talk you through the fact that we are fully rigged out. We are fully rigged out with a fractal way of living that affords us immunity against ideological possession. But we need to be counting on what being fully rigged out looks like. If we are rigged out with a fractal way of living, what are we talking about? We're talking about the death and resurrection of Christ. Being able to face reality as it comes at us with all its challenges, with all its dangers, and we face it with a fractal way of living, that our lives will be filled with order, disorder, but being reoriented back into order. And we will go through this cycle so often in our lives until we become mindful of what is happening to us. Jesus is the true and living way. He's the way to the Father. The Father is the originator of creation, the one who originates ideas, the one who is the realm of ideas, and the one in whom we live and move and have our being. Is a personal God. And so the question I'd like to address this morning is, what do ideologies do that a way of living avoids? Listen carefully now. What do ideologies do to us that a way of living avoids? A way of living as a way of sidestepping all of the dangers that a pre-programmed set or system of ideas that are memorized as a simulacrum something that I just regurgitate when I am asked to answer a certain question or set of questions. A way of living is something that is dynamic. A system is something that is static. A set of propositions, 10 articles in a statement of faith would be static propositions versus Jesus as the true and living way being a person, being someone who dynamically lives his life in and through every believer, lives his life in and through his assembly, which we call church. And so I want us just to look at verse number 8 of that second chapter of Colossians, because that chapter is going to unfold for us in verse 8 the danger of ideology. It says, see to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ. Notice the three repetitions in the verse. According to, according to, according to. And it comes up in a section where Paul talks to the Colossian believers and says that when you engage in knitting together in love, being knit together in love, unity in love, not unity at the expense of love, and you are engaging in agapic actions, you are engaging in a way of living that's going to cost you to benefit others. And as you do that, you will have this ability to reach. Reach for what? Full assurance of understanding and knowledge of God's mystery, which is Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. As we lovingly engage with the believing community under the hand of God, as we lovingly do that, we set ourselves up to extend our reach toward wisdom. Because wisdom is not something that you can own the way you own money or investments. It's something you reach for. It's that which opens up to you as you engage in loving living. And so in verse 8 comes the warning. Verse 8 says, ideologies captivate wayward minds. Now, as I said, an ideology is an idolatry of ideas. You're worshiping at the altar of propositional statements, and you set them up in creeds, in confessions, in statements of faith, and you enshrine them as if those things have the dynamism to keep you away from indulging in the flesh, because that is what Paul focuses on as he walks through this chapter, as he gets to verse number 15, where he's going to show very, very specifically that the work of Christ has disabled the powers of darkness and canceled the debt that is against us. But we need to understand that propositional statements, philosophies, according to the traditions of men, verse number 23, are of no value in stopping the indulgence of the flesh. So, yeah, you can be given to high certainty that comes from propositional statements. I believe this and I believe that. Well, don't tell me what you know. Show me how you transform. Because propositions are the currency of knowing. It is the currency of dispositional knowing. Knowing in a process kind of way, encountering reality perspectively, multi-perspectively, and participating in the life of the real world. And now he says that, listen, ideologies captivate minds, but they captivate minds that leads them off the track, away from following Christ, because Christ is a person. I'm a follower of the way. I'm not the follower of a creed. I'm not the follower of a confession, as wonderful as creeds and confessions and statements of faith are. I am encouraged not to camp there, right? Because ideologies have high explanatory power. They can explain things very well, but they are data compressions of blocks of context that are cut away because I am scrunching something into one sentence. And I am disambiguating something which is semantic. It comes up as a sentence, it comes up as a statement, and I sharpen that statement the way I sharpen a knife, the way I sharpen a weapon. Because you see, we crave high certainty in our lives, don't we? And we love preachers and teachers who have high explanatory power and can explain, in inverted commas, everything. Because we crave certainty. We hate uncertainty. We are very left hemispherically focused because the left hemisphere of the brain is like that. It represents what the right hemisphere presences or presents. It represents it in a static kind of way. That's why Paul says, see to it that no one takes you captive. By what? Philosophy. Because there is a right pursuit of philosophy and a wrong pursuit of philosophy. A right pursuit of philosophy is one who loves wisdom. That's what the word is about. But the way it's used here, it has to do with those ways of thinking that capture our minds to frame reality in a particular way. It's empty and it's deceitful because it is framed according to human tradition. It's framed according to elemental spirits of the world and not according to Christ. Now, we need to spend a little time here because ideologies have no plausibility potential. They are grounded in something that is post hoc, what we call post hoc rationalizations. I believe things that are in search of a proof text. So I first believe those things because I'm told what to believe. And now I run to the scriptures and I try to find a verse that backs what I believe. Now, the Christian faith, men and women, is a lot more dynamic than that. And the danger of pursuing isms, 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 is that they captivate our minds. They get us tied up in knots that our thinking is slanted in a particular way. And we have to learn to defend the faith. That's what apologetics is. I want to suggest to you that if we as the believing community follow an Ephesians 4 edification model, where together we are studying the scriptures together with those gifted men and women, because all are gifted in a particular way. And as we gather around the scriptures, we dialogue around the scriptures in a non-rivalrous kind of way. Versus, this is what I believe, and you better conform, or else you are out. And peer group pressure is an amazing thing. So we are all driven to think the same thing, and nobody is challenged to think for themselves, so that we lose free thinking and we lose free speech. And then we wonder why Christians cannot dialogue in the marketplace and the market space, because they are not taught how to voice what they think as they engage the biblical text. I must get clerical George to interpret for me, and I outsource my responsibility to interpret for myself. And that's why it's important to get believers to read the scriptures with understanding and to read deeply. There are levels of reading: a cursory reading, a deep reading, an inspectional reading, a syntopical kind of reading. Well, when I learn how to think biblically, because I am able to think through the story, the unfolding story of the book of Colossians, see to it that no one takes you captive, because there is something lurking in the background. It's called elementary or elemental spirits. I want to suggest something to you that you probably haven't heard. This word stoicheia in the original text can mean a couple of things. Can mean the ABCs of spiritual living, the basics, as we would say. Of course, if you talk about the basics, they differ as Christians' faces differ. Because I've got 10 basics, you've got 20, another has 35, and they call it fundamentals. They even call it fundamentals of the faith. And yet all of us have different sets. Then elementary spirits or stoicheia could be a reference to something or an entity in the spirit world. I really think the word tends to lean that way, because part of the Colossian heresy was this, what I would call pre-Christian Gnostic understanding. Gnosticism was only full-blown, or got full-blown, by the 2nd and 3rd into the 4th centuries. It's not something that existed in the 1st century, but there were pre-Christian strands coming out of Second Temple Judaism already. There are strands of this kind of thinking, and they would be what we could call it nascent Gnosticism, or a weak form of Gnosticism. But there are no formal writings or treatises that embody or explain all of Gnostic teaching. And so I would suggest a book by Edwin Yamauchi. Yeah, it does quite a good job of explaining pre-Christian Gnostic ideas, and it does very good research. I found him most helpful in understanding the uh, Colossian heresy. Very different than what you would see in some of the other books, because they believed in this thing called the pleroma versus the soma, right? Pleroma was these emanations from on high. They came from on high, and they had to do with the worship of angels. Something that was very developed in Gnostic teaching, which had to do with the worship of the eons. Very sophisticated, intricate explanations of what Gnosticism is all about. And I think today we suffer greatly within the Christian community of being baptized in some of Gnostic teaching, in some of our isms. And the philosophy here, which is according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, are not according to Christ. Because if you pursue Christ, as is revealed in the text of Scripture, that's where your authority lay. We look at scriptural authority. We do not optimize for anything but scriptural authority. If the text doesn't say so, we've got no business saying so. And so what you see here is that very often believers optimize for high explanatory power. And when they can explain things with certainty, they buy it. They cannot leave an issue hanging and live at a point of tension, or even live with uncertainty. They will rather go for plausibility of arguments that have no grounding in scriptural authority. So as I come to the biblical text, there are three irreducible things that I need to have. I need to have God in the equation. I need to have the Bible in the equation. And thirdly, I need to have truth in the equation. Because God has spoken truthfully in the Bible. That doesn't mean that there's no truth anywhere else. All truth is God's truth. Wherever it is found, and wherever it takes me. That's a very dangerous statement to make to uninitiated ears. But it's something I suggest you would need to think through for yourself. And so this morning, I have two questions for you. Why do you crave high certainty for everything? Unless I can have 100% certainty, I won't move and I won't believe. And once you answer that question, why do I crave high certainty? And then the second question that's on the horizon is, what does it do for me? Why do I crave for it? And what does it do for me? So there's something to ponder because a lot of the heresy and the incorrect thinking, a lot of the ideology that had taken the Colossian church captive had to do with wrong-headed philosophy and empty deceit. Because what makes me highly adaptive can make me highly deceptive, all in one and the same breath. And I will explain that to you as we go throughout the days to come. Things that make me highly adaptive can make me at the same time highly deceptive to error. And why is that? But you see, we are followers of the way. Jesus is the true and living way. No man comes to the Father except through me, he says. So, Theo, back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Terry. I'm glad that we're going to be spending a lot more time through this because there's such a lot to wrap one's mind around, and especially on a Monday morning. So thank you for that. The encouragement here for me particularly is that there's a great deal of wisdom that is possible out of those relationships that we have, that, as you hinted in an earlier reference, it comes out of loving living, or living in the context of love, and then also a space where vibrant dialogue is capable of getting us to think right, because right thinking leads to right living. For those of you who joined us this morning, thank you very, very, very much for being here with us. We see you tomorrow morning, same time, right here on the Fifth Connection. Terry, thank you so much.
Thank you, Theo. Thank you, listeners.